Hello and welcome back to GP Bikes. I've been playing a lot of GP Bikes over the Christmas period. I know GP Bikes is out on Steam for just over a week and there is a lot of videos on YouTube about it, but very little content on how to improve on the game for beginners especially. So I decided in today's video to make my top 5 beginner tips for all new players since its arrival on Steam. Now, GP Bikes is very challenging at first, but with some guidance it can become a lot more user friendly and becomes by far the best bike sim you can buy currently on the market. Now in this video I will cover a lot of controller settings that will improve your experience and then jump on track for some more techniques and tips. So let's jump in. So to get set up on this game, first thing I will recommend is go into profiles and create a profile. The main reason why you need to create a profile is because when we go into settings in a second and we make a custom controller layout, we change all your dead zones and everything like that. If you don't save it to a profile, when you go online it will reset to when the game is launched, which means you lose all your inputs and stuff like that. So it happened to me a few times. I was recommended by a friend to do that, and since then it's fixed it. So first thing is go into profiles, new profile, put in your nickname, a few bits it asks you, and just save your profile. And then we come over to the settings. You have a couple of tabs down here, 6 to be exact: input, input 2, 3, graphics, miscellaneous, and simulation. So we're going to start in input. Now up here you can change your controller. If you don't have a controller turned on, you won't be able to find your controller. For me it's X, but we have it on custom because I've changed it. So everything here is pretty simple in controls. Lean, obviously is leaning the bike. Throttle, brake, rear brake, clutch. Rider, front, back lean, so leaning forward and back, or forward and back, not front. Rider, left and right. Now I don't have them binded because I have it on automatic. I'll show you in simulation in a bit. But this is very important here, this direct lean. Now, if you have direct lean down at 10%, what it affects is how fast the bike sits back up. So if you have it down, we'll say 5%, you'll actually have to mid-corner stop turning in the direction of the corner and pick the bike back up to straighten it out. It won't automatically want to go straight. Whereas if you put it up to 94%, then the bike, as soon as you take a bit of, if you sit the bike up at all, it'll jump forward, it will jump up like a spring. So I run it usually in around 60. Between 50 and 85% is my recommended window. Anything above 85, it's too springy and it can cause you to lose the front. Anything below 50 and it's just too lethargic coming out of the corners to pick it up. So anywhere in that, I personally run it in the 60s. Force feedback, it doesn't really work on this. I will show you a mod in a minute. Mods are part of this video, so I will show you a bit about them. But there's a mod to get better feedback, force feedback and stuff like that. But we're going to go up here to advanced. So with the advanced, you have exactly the same options: lean, throttle, etc, etc. Now I'm going to go to brake and explain these. So dead zone, obviously if your controller is bad, you won't use it really unless you have really bad triggers. You would never use on brake unless you want to. It wouldn't be anything for dead zone you'd want to use it for. It'd be more along the lines of if you had to change it if you're braking awkwardly or found you needed a dead zone on your braking, which I don't see the point in because there's other things here to make it better. But linearity, so if you look at so actually if you hover over it gives you a description. 100 means linear direct control. Moving the slider towards non-linear gives more precision in the first part of the input at the expense of the second part. It is useful for digital inputs and gamepads. So what that really means is if you put linearity high, you have more control at the end. If you put it down low, you have more at the start of braking. So if you click this as a box, you can change these. If you click smooth, what this button is, I'm going to change. Well, I'm not going to save any of these, so I'm just going to play with them. So if you put the press down, as soon as you press it, it just presses just like a normal trigger would work. If you put it all the way up to 100, watch how slow the bar fills up. I'm still pressing the trigger at the same speed, but it's more of a slow build up of button pressure. So I run that at 30, I think it was. So it's slightly slowed down, just so even if I'm a bit raggedy on the trigger with my finger, if I brake a little bit aggressively, this will kind of smoothen out and I won't have a bad time. Release, so put to 100, it's slow coming back off, it's not snappy back. So put release down to 0, watch how it just flies up, gone. Back to 100 again just to show it, and slow I'm leaving out the controller trigger exact. I'm just flicking my finger off it, and that's how slow it is. Now, I wouldn't recommend running this high, because if you're braking and you're just about to lose the front, you leave the brake off and it continues braking for you, you'll crash. So I run it at 10% just as a base setup for myself, just so it's slightly better. Now, gain. Now, this is very important when it comes to braking. I use this on my rear brake, you'll see in a second. So gain is how much of the input you can use. So 100%, you can see the bar is fully red, so that means I'm on 100% brake. Now if you go to 160, 170, you'll see nothing. Now all you'll see is the braking is going a lot faster, because the game thinks this bar is only like a third of what you actually have. Whereas if you bring it down to 50 or 65, we'll go to, I can only go to 65% of my braking potential. Why this is important, you'll see in a minute on my rear brake, is that you can, so if you say I can't brake anything above 90%, okay, we'll just go and have your maximum 90. Then you can brake as hard as you want at all time. You could change this for the front brake, but a lot of time, as we'll see in the braking techniques I show off in a bit, you can brake harder the longer you're braking on this game. It's not like any other game I've played where you get on the brakes hard, you stay braking hard, and then you come off them. This one is you get braking and slowly increase it just slightly, and then you can get away with it. So I wouldn't recommend it for the front brake, because you can use a lot more. But if you find that you just can't stop yourself from going to 100% brake, just bring it down to 85, and that's all you can do. You can't use the extra bit. So if that's where you know that's causing your issues with your bike, that little gap there, just basically map it out of the controller. It's all you need to do. So I'm going to go to the rear brake, and it's exactly the same for me. If I press my rear brake, I can only use that. The rear brake, with the trigger, you can kind of look, I can press it 10%, 20%, 30%, 40. I can kind of go in and out, whereas the rear brake I've mapped to RB, which means it's a button. I can press it or I can't press it. I can't modulate it. So I've taken the full scope out of it, so it's down now to 65%, which means at all times when I'm on my rear brake, it's 65%. That means it won't lock. It's a bit more module and it'll work better. Input 2, these are your shifts, these are your ECUs. Again, I map all these to my D-pad. Make sure you have reset on. I have it on the right stick, click it in. When you crash, you can't just pick the bike up, you have to reset. Hold this as well to reset it fully. You'll, again, when you're in the game, you'll know it as well. Make sure you know your K and or your push bike, which you have mapped your keyboard. You can map it to your controller, but you'll find you'll run out of key bindings for the controller, so I just keep it on K and I just to push it. Sometimes you crash, you get up and you're standing right in front of a barrier and you have to go backwards, and there's no reverse, so you have to push yourself back. I don't have a lot of these. I don't have mapped because, again, just don't need them. Gestures, I have not used them. Tear off, it's very handy if you're in first person. Clean tear off. Heading, basically when you're looking around with your head is what this does. So if you look in GP left, MotoGP, it'll look at the side of the bike, and if you look right, it'll look at the side of the bike, whereas this, it's like a head movement. The bike kind of goes out of vision. I'll show off in a second. Look back, again, very important, and change view, and just other little niche things. Now, this is replay carrying system, not really important. You can change all these. I leave them alone. I just use a keyboard if I'm in the replay. And then graphics, use whatever your PC can run. I have it maxed out. Now, I don't recommend using HDR for the main reason of it being a bit glitchy, and it shows up black spots every once in a while. Kind of, there's a black square just appears and flickers on my screen, so I leave it off. Miscellaneous, again, the only thing I recommend is high, very high on the bandwidth, just to make it a bit easier. And you can skip the intro. I find the intro a bit laggy and slow, so I skip it and the game boots faster. Now to the simulation. So we're going to start up here in the cockpit view. If you're running in first person, this is your field of view. I would recommend putting it up a bit. It is very, very close at first when you first launch it. I have it maxed out just to give me a better view. These are all, these are for the third person, and I don't really see any difference between any of them. I just have it stuck to joystick. I've changed it every once in a while. With corner anticipation, your rider's head will look to the apex. Now, I don't know if it does in first person because I play predominantly in third, but it does do it when I'm on third person. I can see the rider looking at the apex. I presume in first person, it would do the same. But now we get on to the riding aid. So I'm going to run through them quickly. A lot of them are self-explanatory, but I'll explain anyway. Automatic shift, it's an automatic bike. It shifts for you. Shift help, it's probably like a semi-automatic. It won't completely do it. It will allow you to change gear, but if you're bouncing off the limiter, it'll shift up for you. Again, automatic I wouldn't recommend. Maybe run shift help. It would be better, but just try and get into the habit of riding in your own gears. I'll explain why in a second. Automatic clutch. Every time you crash, you have to, like, I've my clutch bound to my binded to the right stick to push it forward, so I actually have a clutch, because you can't really use the clutch as a button. You need, like a car, you need to leave the clutch out. Like a bike, you just need to leave it out and bite. So it is very handy to have this on, because then every time you crash, you just put it into gear, off you go, and you don't have to try and slip the clutch. But it's very handy as well to have the clutch on for popping wheelies, and anytime you get in hot, you can just clutch it and it kind of takes away your engine braking and stuff. Traction help, traction control, anti-wheelie and brake help. These just help with exactly what it says. I've never used them. I don't use them because I want the best experience possible. Now, this one here, automatic rider leaning forward and back, left and right. I have that set on because you can't map them both to the same. If I could map my leaning and my rider to my left stick, I would. But unfortunately you can't, which means I'd have to use two different inputs to control the rider and the bike, a bit like MXGP. But because I need the inputs for other things, I actually can't. So I have to have these set. And show best line is just your race line. Automatic tires change. If you watched my first play, you would have realized I didn't have this on because I went out on a wet track on slicks and had a great time. So I've always just said, if you come into the pits in a qualifying session or practice, it'll put on new tires for you. And stability help. Now this is new to the game, and predominantly when you first play the game, you'll notice the front end feels very, very sketchy. As soon as you get to the mid part of the corner and you take, either you're leaving off the brake, you pick up the throttle, you'll find the bike tucks so easily. Stability help fixes this. It doesn't completely fix it. It doesn't make it perfect, but it's much better and it's rideable, because I was riding around Valencia on a modded M2 and I couldn't get my knee down. It felt like I was on a wet track with cold, dry tires. It was really bad, and I figured out, thanks to some help from friends, that stability help really, really helps. So out of all the aids, this is the one I recommend the most. These are all preference, depends on how good you are, but stability help, play without it, play with it, and you'll see the big difference. So now you've made your profile, your settings are as best as you can be. Let's get on the tarmac. So setups are incredibly important in GP bikes. Now they are very in-depth, and to your average player they will go right over their head. Most of it they will not understand, but doesn't mean you can't make positive changes to your bike that will affect your performance on track. Now I will suggest starting off slowly and adjusting 1 or 2 things at a time, because it is very easy to change 3 or 4 things at a time and get completely lost in a setup and not understand what's causing the issues. Even such things as tire pressures not being in the optimum pressure can cause lots of issues on track. There are plenty setup guides online if you're struggling to build your own. So for a summary of the setups, they're worth a lot of time and can completely change the overall feeling of a bike, and are well worth sinking time into. Don't forget to look online though, as there's some seriously good setups online. So for braking. When braking, there are many rules you must abide by. Now the best can bend these rules, but today we're not focusing on that. You cannot brake at 100% pressure in this game. Unlike MotoGP 21, you must manage the brake pressures at all times. It is very easy to apply too much front brake pressure and cause the bike to lose control under heavy braking. Same goes for the rear, but that won't be as big of an issue after adjusting the gain in input for controller settings. You must be also very careful on your downshifts not to lock the rear wheel, which will cause the bike to move a lot under braking and making it a lot harder to maintain on trajectory for the corner. The best thing you can do to start off with a full tank of fuel, hard tyres, and go around and round and round. Then you will get tyres up to temperature and slowly start to understand each braking zone and will be able to increase pressure and brake later up until you find your limits. So for a summary of braking, manage brake pressures, don't downshift too fast, and build up to your braking markers. Don't try to brake at your limit from lap 1. Patience and respect. Now, most of you must be thinking, what have they got to do with riding faster and more consistent on GP bikes? Now, like myself and many others, most people will be coming over from MotoGP 21, Ride 4, or the equivalent in Rims Racing or Track Day R. Most of them games you can get to a certain level and really abuse the physics. 300 horsepower GP bike on MotoGP, it is scarily easy to ride. Yes, you can make the mistake and crash, but you can ride around these so easy and it's easy to ride. On GP bikes it is a complete opposite. The bikes are trying to kill you at every given opportunity, just like a real bike. So it is incredibly important that you be patient with your inputs and respect the bike you're on, because at any moment it could snap, sending you into orbit. To summarise, treat the bike with respect and you'll find you'll go faster over time rather than trying to break lap records coming out of the pits. Throttle control is incredibly important on GP bikes, mainly because a lot of the bikes don't have traction control, so it is very easy to high side. Having good throttle control is worth a good few tenths every lap by managing to get the power to the ground without spinning or throw yourself to the moon and back. Again, if you're struggling with throttle, I would suggest playing with the linearity and the other advanced options in the input settings. Smooth and precise throttle control is key in GP bikes. Mods are what make this game great. The standard game is very bare bones and completely outdated. The physics to the current M2, which is the Moto 2 bike, in the game are very broken. Also, the lack of tracks completely limit the game. Now, if you can get into the modding community, the game becomes reborn. There are no boundaries for what you can achieve with the game. Like I said in the description, there will be a modding tutorial video, so check that out. So that has been 5 beginner tips to understanding and getting better at GP bikes. If you would like a more in-depth tutorial for each one of these factors I mentioned in the video, please let me know in the comments down below. But that has been all for today. I hope you have enjoyed. Thank you all for watching and I'll catch you all in the next one. Bye bye.